Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the tea and coffee break. We will now proceed with Session B, focused on rural contexts, indigenous solutions, and innovations. This session highlights insights from experts working in rural settings, examining how communities use local knowledge, traditional techniques, and innovative approaches to adapt to a changing climate. To lead this session, it is my honor to introduce our two chairs. Ladies and gentlemen, our first chair is Dr. Shahzad Bashir, Dean of the Institute for the Study of Muslim Civilizations at the Aga Khan University, bringing over 2 decades of academic leadership and scholarship from leading universities in the United States. Before joining AKU, he served as the Aga Khan Professor of Islamic Humanities at Brown University, where he also directed the Center for Middle East Studies and founded the Islam and Humanities Research Project. His work spans Islamic history and thought across the Middle East, South Asia, and Central Asia, with a focus on time, poetry, the body, Sufism, and Shiism. The author of 5 books and over 40 scholarly articles, his most recent publication, A New Vision for Islamic Pasts and Futures, reimagines how we narrate Islamic histories. A recipient of prestigious fellowships from the Guggenheim, Carnegie, and Mellon Foundations, among others, Dr. Bashir continues to shape the field of Islamic studies through his research, teaching, and editorial leadership. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Shahzad Bashir. Our co-chair is Dr. Anna Bunnell, an assistant professor at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Dr. Anna Bunnell, a dedicated medical professional and researcher specializing in maternal health, climate change, and occupational health. Based in the Gambia since 2019, she focuses on her PhD research on the impact of environmental heat on pregnancy and birth outcomes. Dr. Bunnell collaborates with pregnant subsistence farmers in West Africa to understand the effects of high ambient temperatures on maternal and fetal health. Her work addresses the urgent need to quantify risks, identify physiological mechanisms, and advocate for interventions in the face of rising global temperatures. Affiliated with the Medical Research Council Gambia and renowned institutions in infectious and tropical diseases, her research holds significant implications for sub-Saharan Africa, aiming to address climate change challenges and find sustainable solutions while improving maternal and child health outcomes. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Anna Bunnell. Dr. Bashir, Dr. Bunnell, the floor is now yours to begin Session B.
Thank you very much for the generous introduction. It's lovely to be here. Thank you very much, Dr. Butta, for the invitation. It's been a fantastic conference so far in terms of listening to varied perspectives and all of them bringing up crucial questions. So we are going to continue with this in the same pattern. So this session is Rural Context, Indigenous Solutions and Innovations. And our first speaker is going to be architect Shahid Saeed Khan, who is the CEO of Indus Earth Trust. So his bio is architect Shahid Saeed Khan is a distinguished Pakistani architect and advocate for sustainable community-driven design with over 40 years of experience in architecture and rural development. He's the founder and chairman of the non-profit organization Indus Earth Trust, established to support climate-resilient housing, renewable energy, and rural livelihoods in Pakistan. Educated in the UK in environmental architecture and trained in building techniques in France and Japan, Shahid previously led a private practice in Scotland before returning to Pakistan in the early 1990s. His work spans consultancy for the World Bank, disaster-resilient housing in coastal Balochistan, and integrating local materials and skills into sustainable design solutions. And the topic of his talk is sea level rise and its effects on Karachi and surroundings. So please welcome architect Shahid Saeed Khan. Thank you.
Is this on? Yeah. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, but my apologies. I was to give a talk on sea level rise, but there was some data that I needed to confirm from the UN, and I didn't receive it in time. So now I am going to talk about the subject that I was given first, which is about rural housing, community housing. Let me just give you a little background of where this interest of mine started. It started in Zambia. I was working for the British government. It was the ODA at that time. And I began to realize I was sent there, and I have no, I don't want to offend anybody, including myself. I was sent there to make life more acceptable for those that lived in the rural areas. I actually began to realize in the 3 years that I was there that I could not really contribute much to their life. Professor Vandal really made it very clear to me yesterday that really it is the communities themselves that have the answers. We have to listen. I consider my job to provide the tools and then to get out of the way. I'm amazed, and I will show you some examples. I'm amazed at the extent of knowledge that the people in Sindh and Balochistan, that's the areas that I concentrate my work on, have on how to build comfortable, I use the word again, comfortable homes. As these figures show you, we are in a position in Pakistan where the housing problem cannot be resolved by either government or the private sector. It has to be resolved, if there is to be a resolution, by the people themselves. And that is what we do. We try and train them to build in the way that they understand. I will come to it in a minute, but the basis of our work is to do with earth, the use of earth. In my opinion, climate change has collapsed. And we're not talking about change anymore. And please forgive me, a lot of these statistics that I'm showing you already know, most of you. It was intended to be, I was hoping that there would be more government officials here, and certainly more students. But whoever is here, it is intended for them, because most of you know these, the things that I'm mentioning here. But really, it has become imperative, as far as I'm concerned, that we have to change our attitude. We have to change the way we think. And as far as my profession is concerned, we have to start to listen more than to say that we know the solutions. Because the solutions are there. We need to look for them. And I'm constantly finding those solutions, not through my education, not through my workload, which I'm still doing, but when I talk to the people in the rural areas, and I've been doing this for the last 20 years, I'm amazed as to their knowledge. And why don't we listen to them? Unfortunately, my profession has a ego problem. We think we know the solutions, we know the answers. I submit that we know very little. Just to give you some figures of what the disasters, because the disasters are very closely related to the work we do. We started work in Azad Kashmir after the 2005 earthquake, and I will show you examples of that later on. We looked at the houses that had collapsed, and we used the materials from the collapsed houses. So of those of you who know the north and know of the type of construction that takes place there, it's to do with these big beams that are sort of diameter is around about a foot. We sliced them into planks to make beams. And we found that we had enough timber and enough stone to build the houses that I am talking about, and I will again show them to you. We've done houses in building in earth as a material in Balochistan. As has been pointed out, the temperature difference between a a building that is made out of concrete, but I did not see much reference made. The use of mud was used. I don't like the use of mud. It sort of signifies things which are not permanent. The houses that we've built from the 2010-2011 floods, which was funded by the UNDP in 2011, they're still standing, they're still working, and they're all made out of earth. I think I'm going to rely more on questions than my presentation like this. Build Back Better. This is about the NGO that you've already been introduced to. My specialization started with the French organization called Cratère in France. After the earthquake, I was given a scholarship to go there and to study the work. And then I also went to Japan to look at how earthquake-resistant buildings can be made using indigenous materials. We are interested in providing permanent homes. And I mean permanent homes that will last 50 years. And these are lessons that we have learned over the time. And we have built seven pilot houses where we've trained masons to use earth as a building material. And the reason why I am mentioning this at the moment for the audience to understand is more of a psychological issue when we use a machine to make the earth blocks. It gives comfort to the community that a machine is being used to make the block. It does not necessarily have to be, and I will show them examples where we used adobe blocks which are sun-dried, and that actually is a 2-story building. But the issue is not technical. The issue is purely psychological, both for the user, for the donor, for the government, and for the private sector. I will show you examples of buildings that have been made with earth that are over 100 years. Some of them are 300 years old. In Yemen, they are 16-story high earth buildings, 300 years old. One of the reasons of doing this also is to, when we train the masons, it gives them a source of livelihood. They are able to use their expertise to help others to build, and obviously it's a paid involvement. A CEB machine costs about 160,000 rupees. It's made here in Pakistan. I've made mine in Karachi. Interestingly enough, a lot of people don't know, but these blocks have a better PSI strength than concrete. Not only do they have a better strength ratio, their absorption of water, rainwater, is much lower. And I haven't used any scientific techniques to measure the difference of temperature, but I've used thermometers indoors and outdoors. From the buildings that we made, we recorded around about 15 degrees, and in some cases 18 degrees difference in the outside and inside temperature by using this material. I think you've read most of what I've put up on the board. I don't think I need to go past this, but I'm very, very keen in our organization to head towards a zero carbon footprint. Both in my architectural work and in this NGO work, we are concentrating on that. In my architectural work, I've not really succeeded to make it zero, but it's pretty close. And certainly in the NGO, the works that I'm going to show you, it is zero. This is the machine. I call it a machine because that's what the community called it. But it's a Sinva ram machine which was invented in Chile, I think, or Chile or Peru, many, many years ago. And the earth constituents really has about 50% sand, 20% clay, and 15% silt in it as a mixture. The mixture, and we have about 6% lime or 6% cement as a binder, depending on where it is and what the weather conditions are like in the area. The mixture is very important. A lot of people say that you build earth houses and they'll collapse. Well, certainly the ones that are going up by individuals who don't actually understand the science of the earth material, they will collapse through the rain. But ours have been up for the last 11 years. And we are actually building these have been built in the Garo wind corridor. As some of you might know and some of you might not know, this is the area where all the wind turbines are being placed to provide electricity for the country. So you can imagine that the wind that blows here is of a very, very high level, and especially during storms. This gives you an idea of what the building looks like. This is in Balochistan. When it's going up, they look like concrete blocks. Again, that's a psychological effect that impresses, if I use that word, the user. But actually, there's no concrete in any of our buildings. We do use stone for the foundations, but otherwise it's all indigenous. And there's a machine here that we made, which makes about 2,000 blocks a day. The machine that you saw before, which was hand-pressed, makes about 300 blocks a day. This is the result of the building that you just saw. We use lime plaster. The lime actually reduces the heat gain inside the building to a great extent. Here's some of the examples of the use of this material. As I said, we are really training people to build their own houses. And I am convinced that is the route to take to help resolve the housing problem of our country. Over here, the materials that you need is cement, and not much, as I said, only 6%. A Panaflex sheet, which is to provide the waterproofing. Bajri, which is the earth material, we call it bajri. And the labor is your own, so it's free. If we are to build, and I will show you examples of what we've done, the cost would be obviously much higher because we will be employing us as contractors. But now, over the last 15 years, I have noticed that these people that we've trained are building their own houses, especially in Balochistan. Here's an example of a model house that we built, 800 square feet, all using CEB blocks, earth foundation. It's 3 foot high to prevent from floods. And the roof was donated to us by a steel company. They wanted to experiment to see how it would work. This was a new product which we gladly used. But actually, in all our other works, in the example that I showed you before, we don't use steel at all. This is the plan of the building that you've just seen. Talking about learning, we initially started building houses with 2 rooms. And I thought that you'd have 1 room as a bedroom and 1 room as a living room. But we certainly learned that this is not acceptable to the communities. They only want 1 room. The entire family lives in 1 room. They want to have a veranda, yes. And you can see does this work? I'll use my own pointer. When you want something to work, it doesn't work. No, it won't. Anyway. You can perhaps see the main room where the beds are shown, and to the right is the veranda, and then what we call a sehen, which is an outside area. We call it a courtyard. Oh, thank you. Yes. This is the veranda. This is the main room here, and this is the sehen. Outdoor toilets, and an outdoor kitchen. I have seen many proposals being made by companies that do not understand the way that the rural population lives, where they have attached the bathrooms to the bedrooms in Western style. These houses are lying empty. No one lives in them. The bathroom is essential to be outside the living area. And the main thing has been pointed out, when you want to avoid the heat, you spend most of your time outdoors, but also the women need parda, and that is what the sehen is for. And there's a little porch here where the men can sit and chat to their neighbors, to themselves, etc. This is adobe blocks. Please forgive me for those that already know all about this, but as I said, the audience was intended to be, but I don't see any people from the government here. It's just standard things that have been going on for centuries. We haven't invented anything here. This is being built, this is the two-room house, which we've now converted into a one-room. But it is adobe construction. And it has a plastic sheeting on the top to prevent the heat from hitting the roof. Unfortunately, it was blown away by one of the storms that I mentioned to my colleagues earlier this morning, because they're doing the bamboo covering on the houses in Karachi. This is again these are experimental houses. As I said, they are still standing. So as they say, the proof of the pudding. These, by the way, were built by the community. What we did, drawings are not understood by the community, and hardly surprising. So we made models, and the models were the ones that they understood and were able to apply. You can see that the white roof, which is made of lime, is to reflect the sun, heat off. Because this was a part of the roof, all these materials are bought in the market. Nothing is imported. This is bought local timber, local bamboo, local chatai, as we call it. Even the windows and the doors are made locally. Now, we wanted to make sure that we didn't import anything from outside. When I say locally, these houses are built in a town called Gharo, which is about 1.5 hours from Karachi, east. This is the two-story building, which everybody said would fall down. This is made out of adobe blocks. Again, I want to emphasize, I'm not inventing anything over here. It's been there for centuries. We're just providing the tools, if you like, to show that what is being emulated by those in power and those in authority who keep saying that we have to build concrete. As was pointed out by Dr. Zahra yesterday, she has spent so much time in making a document that says that you can do it without the use of concrete. But then as she showed the example, that it was ignored. Am I right? They just ignored it, and they built a concrete building next to one of the examples that you shown. And I think in front of you, I spoke to the government official, and I asked him, I said, why do you ignore people who have spent so much time in doing research and coming with an understanding? And he just gave me the usual political, yes. I'm sorry, I'll just speak in Urdu. हाँ हम लोग करते हैं, हम सोच रहे हैं. We will think about it. And we are doing it. I hope they are. I hope they are. This is what is called the Manhattan of the East. I don't know why it's called that, but that's the label that's been given. It is Yemen. These are 6 to 12 stories high buildings made entirely of earth. One of the issues concerning earth is that you have to maintain it. You have to look after it. So if you have an earth building every 2 years at least, you should, maybe 3 years depending on the climate, you should provide a plaster coating to the surface to give it protection. But again, the communities are used to that, and most of the plaster coating that is done to these buildings are done by the women, and the women are expert in this. The women are expert in building, by the way. I might add the women are experts in most things. This is a building that's in the US. And you know this argument that it'll all get washed away in the rain? Well, please note the water spigots, as they call. It obviously rains a lot over here. And look at the condition of the building. I've seen hundreds of these. There is no doubt in my mind, if you use the right proportion of the material, you'll have. Now, these are some examples of work that we are proposing, but as yet we have had no interest. In urban situations, especially in towns of Sindh and Balochistan, not so much in the city of Karachi. These are again blocks. They have holes in the middle where we can use rebars if needed. Indeed, you can have your electric wiring going through there. But this is to be done in stages. Most of the plots that are given for the underprivileged are 80 square yard blocks, 80 square yard. This is a phase 1, if you like, where they will build just their 1 bedroom, and they have a kids' play area and the courtyard, and obviously the kitchen and bathroom. Then you go to the next stage, where they build a room and a staircase, which will take you to the floor above, and you end up with 3 rooms, open air to all these rooms, because there'll be another building going up next to it, open air to all these rooms for ventilation. As has been mentioned earlier, how important ventilation is. And this is what, well, our impression of what it might look like.
So apologies for intervening, but it's sort of time to wrap up.
Oh, okay, okay. All right. This is what it looks like. This is another example of the same using 100. This is an example of rammed earth. We wanted to show that there is a way of doing rammed earth by the community themselves. This was something they did not know. This is something new. Here's an example of rammed earth in Nepal. Here's another example of what we just recently completed in the rural areas, which is using compressed earth blocks, using bamboo as a material for the roof. The interior of this is 6 years old, or what it looks like inside. Bamboo has to be treated properly. The obstacles, there are no technical issues. The obstacles are not purely, but primarily psychological. Yeah, well, I've already mentioned what the advantages. We did, I think, because of the floods, an example of what could be a floating house. I just want to very quickly show what we did in Kashmir, in the earthquake in Bagh, which is about 4,500 feet high. All our buildings were rejected by the government because we weren't using concrete. But we reused the existing buildings that had collapsed. And if I can just show you the earthquake issue is in the corners. The major issue is the corners. And therefore, we really concentrated on that. This is the completed building, just using the stone that was available there. Another type, that's what it looks like. Very simple design, nothing complicated, because the idea was the community will build themselves. This is a very important slide I wanted to show, especially those that are perhaps in the technical frame of mind. The use of the stone was never in a way where it was like that so that it could slide off, but always this way. So if the pressure of an earthquake took place, the stones would move inwards. Whether our examples work or not, as I've explained to many government officials, God forbid there is another earthquake, but we'll find out then. This is another example of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I think we can take maybe one question because of time. Jeff?
Thank you. Just two quick questions, if I may. First one is the use of cement. You said it's only 6%, but under what circumstances do you need to use cement at all? And secondly, I guess a question of scaling up. How would you scale up something like this?
Okay, so to answer your first question, we use cement where the wind pressure is very high for erosion. The blocks can get eroded very quickly because there's sand on the ground. So the wind that blows touches the blocks. So we use cement in those situations. But primarily we use lime. Lime is a much preferred material. Scaling up, I have tried over the years to convince the government that the one way to scale up is to allow us to be given another opportunity after the UNDP fund to go and do this on a larger scale, to demonstrate on a larger scale within the village communities. But as I've said, I don't think the government is as yet ready to accept something like this, which is very unfortunate because India is doing this, Bangladesh is doing this, Sri Lanka, the south of Asia, all of them are doing this. There's nothing new. And as I keep pointing out to them, I'm not inventing anything. These are hundreds of years old, this example, this technique, this technology. But we have a saying in Pakistan, kacha, which means temporary, and pakka, which means permanent. And the use of the word kacha is always used when you use the word earth, and definitely when you use the word mud, which is incorrect, and it's a false statement. Hoping over a period of time they will change their minds. Yes, next question.
Actually, so we're running very late on time, so let's hold the questions for the final discussions. So thank you very much.
Maybe I can talk to you later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Round of applause. Okay, and I will hand it over.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure to welcome the second speaker for this session, Dr. Jeff Tan, who is a professor of political economy at the Institute for the Study of Muslim Civilizations at the Aga Khan University. He holds a PhD in economics from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. Dr. Tan's research focuses on the intersection of governance, economic policy, and infrastructure, examining how states, private sectors, and communities interact in shaping development outcomes. His work on water infrastructure in northern Pakistan highlighted the need to also examine the impact of increasing natural hazards brought about by climate change. His current research investigates the use of traditional building techniques and materials for climate mitigation by reducing carbon emissions and reducing the transmission of heat into homes. Thank you.
Am I on? Yeah. I've got, as usual, more slides than I have minutes for, so it's going to be rapid. But first, I would like to thank Zulfi, Buta, and Jada for inviting me, giving me this opportunity. A special thanks to Stephen Lyon, the Dean of FAS, for allowing me to justify this trip by letting me stay 3 weeks and teach at FAS, amongst other things. And of course, my Dean, Shazad Bashir, who agreed for me to work from Karachi for 3 weeks. I normally start with a research problem, but I think it's necessary for me just to introduce the research site in this case. Then I want to describe a bit of the project, look at our findings, and some of the recommendations that we have. I'm not going to cover all the findings here. I'm hoping that it will complement some of the issues that have arisen, and it's a bit technical in nature. So the research site is in Malaysia. There's East and West Malaysia, so it's in West Malaysia on a small island of Penang. Malaysia, in comparison to Pakistan, is tiny in terms of population, 37 million people, 1.7 million on the island of Penang. And we're focused on this area, the urban area of Georgetown in Penang. Penang was founded in 1786 and was established by the British as a free port. And as a result, that attracted a lot of trade between South Asia, the Middle East, and China. So, and as a result, that a lot of merchants and traders ended up settling in Penang. So, cultural diversity was one of the key features of Penang. And that was important when UNESCO listed Georgetown as a World Heritage Site in 2008. There were 3 main criteria that met: cultural diversity, the history as a historic port town, and of course the architecture and built form. So our first problem here. There are 2 related problems, and Penang's problems are really also the problems more widely in Southeast Asia, as noted by the International Panel on Climate Change. Southeast Asia is going to be one of the 3 hardest hit regions in terms of more extreme weather events, flooding and heat waves, as well as the impact of rising temperature. So this just gives you some idea of some of the costs in the most recent flood in Penang. Now, rainfall has been much more erratic, but also the volume of rainfall has increased by 15% over the past 20 years or so. Here we can see some satellite images from Landsat 8 looking at a 30-year period for the area that we're investigating, Georgetown, between 1988 and 2019. You can see the red's obviously the hotter spots, the green are the cooler spots. This is relative, so what we actually need to note is the minimum and maximum, which one is it? We need to look at that. The minimum of 21.2 and a maximum of 28.5 in 1988 compared to a minimum of 23.6 and a maximum of 37.2. So the maximum is increased by the maximum temperature in Penang over 30 years in Georgetown has increased by 8.7 degrees. Now, we talked about nature-based solutions yesterday, and here, there's a reason why I'm showing this. So this shows you what tree cover does. Okay, and you can see that by, if you look at just the exposed area there. So that's outside the shade, and that temperature is 40.1 degrees there. So it's much hotter without the tree cover. I think what's really interesting here is that when you remove the trees and you have the urban heat island effect, the road temperature is 68.9 degrees. So that's a 30 degree increase, an almost 30 degree increase in surface temperatures. I don't think it takes a genius to work out what needs to be done if you want to cool down a city. Now, when I talk to my friends in South Asia and they look at Malaysia and they go, wow, 30 degrees, 33 degrees, that's nothing when you're looking at 45 degrees upwards. But what I want to introduce here is the idea which was discussed earlier, the idea of a wet bulb temperature, which combines air temperature and humidity to indicate heat stress. So obviously, the way the human body works is that we sweat to regulate our temperature. The higher the humidity, the more we sweat, but up to a certain point, when the humidity is too high, our sweat can't evaporate, which means our body can cool itself. So what we have here actually is, if you look at 33 degrees temperature, and you look at 95% humidity down here, that really is the equivalent of 57 degrees Celsius, yeah, which is really it's highly dangerous, and 35 degrees Celsius is really the threshold of human survivability. So this gives you a context of Southeast Asia and the tropics and why wet bulb temperature is very, very different from dry heat. So the second problem we have is that of decay and neglect in parts of Georgetown with a lot of heritage sites. And the third problem we have is the availability and suitability of building materials to restore these sites. So often building materials are not suitable because they're modern and they're not compatible. They don't breathe, for example. There's a limited choice, and where there is material available that is locally sourced, it's often not of sufficient quality. So the project itself is funded by the British Academy. The British Academy, for those who are not familiar, is the UK's national funder for research in the social sciences and humanities. This particular fund was on culture, heritage, and climate action, hence the connection with harnessing heritage. It's also part of the UK government's official development assistance, aimed at engaging with scholars, government, NGOs, communities, and other stakeholders to really come up with policy-relevant research and to embed this research findings. And in this case, the aim is to demonstrate how culture and heritage can create opportunities to enhance climate adaptation and mitigation. So now I need to show this slide because, as Anna mentioned, I'm a political economist, so I'm really a fish out of water here. And this presentation really is only possible because of the team, the wider team. So it's a partnership between AKU ISMC in London, Think City, which is a project delivery partner and a consultancy working on social and environmental resilience, adaptation, as well as urban planning. They're based in Penang and Kuala Lumpur, and also the University of Science Malaysia. So these are the experts. Most of them are architects. We've got geographers, we've got climate scientists, we've got GIS experts for all the satellite images you've seen. And then from University of Science Malaysia, we've got materials experts because we actually do the measurements, as I'll share with you. So the research question really is in the title of this presentation. How can traditional building techniques and materials help reduce heat and carbon emissions and safeguard authenticity and integrity of heritage buildings in Georgetown World Heritage Site? So to answer that, we've got a number of 6 objectives in total. The first is to actually measure temperatures and the urban heat island effect in Georgetown. To compare the temperatures of traditional versus modern materials. Then we assess the carbon footprint of traditional materials. So this is when the stuff goes to the lab. We document traditional building practices and whether this knowledge is still widespread or whether it's dying out. We identify challenges in adopting this by engaging with various stakeholders, particularly in the industry. And finally, we assess the economic viability of traditional materials and techniques and whether actually how viable it is to actually propose this as a solution. This just gives you an idea of the different components of each of these objectives. So I'm just going to look at 3 findings. I'm not going to touch on the stakeholder engagement and focus group discussions and all that. I just want to look at temperature and carbon emissions, traditional building practices, and economic viability. So I showed you some earlier heat maps of Malaysia, of Penang in Georgetown. What we have here is actually we were able to downscale the land surface temperatures and actually zoom in street by street. So this gives us an error, a temperature error just around 1 degree in terms of the errors in residual errors in temperature. And also it gives us an accuracy of within half a meter. So we can see here that there's the hot zones in Georgetown, the map on the furthest right, has expanded in areas with recent development, and we can actually track this. Here you can see the importance of some of the issues I raised earlier from this more detailed map. You can see that greening significantly reduces urban heat, the urban heat island effect. Shade from buildings affects the surface temperature. Interestingly, the asphalt surfaces, roads, were surprisingly cooler than rooftops. So rooftops were where the highest temperatures were. So here, this is some thermal images of a heritage building in the middle and a modern building on the right. And you can actually see from the heat map, the thermal camera, that wooden windows with shutters and louvers actually reduce heat gain and promote passive ventilation in contrast to the glass windows that retain and transmit more heat due to higher thermal conductivity. Here, this is a thermal camera from above, looking from a higher building, looking at some of the hottest spots in terms of the roof. So tin roofs are the highest temperatures, almost white hot in this case, and clay roofs are cooler, although clay roofs are still quite high in temperature. This one gives you, so this was a restoration undertaken by Think City of a historic fort in Penang, Fort Cornwallis, a British fort, obviously. And you can see we're comparing temperatures on the facade of storeroom 7 compared to storeroom number 8. On storeroom number 7, this is legacy cement. So previously it's been resurfaced with cement, and storeroom 8 is with lime plaster. And you can see the green and the blue. So blue is cooler than the green. This one here is the historic old office of the Malayan Railway in Penang. And the main facade here, that area has been replastered and refurbished by Think City using traditional materials, namely lime plaster. And that there is the untouched facade with cement. And you can see clearly the difference in heat here. So I think this actually hopefully supplements some of the data that's been shared, some of the evidence that's been shared earlier. Now, what we then did is we sampled from about 10 to 15 different heritage buildings of different typologies. We went in there, we got material samples, so you can see how it's done on the right there. And then we submitted it to the lab for some testing, and we wanted to test this for life cycle impact. Now, there's a range of indicators for life cycle impact, from acidification and climate change and ecotoxicity to land and resource use and ozone depletion. So what we found was that, now, what I should actually explain here is that given the range of measures, it was not possible. We wanted to capture this in one slide. So instead of having the various measures, which would be really, really confusing if at all possible, what we did was the material, in this case, aerated concrete blocks versus clay brick, clay brick blocks. What we did was we set the material that was higher in the scores at 100%, and the material that was lower was then measured as a proportion, a percentage of the 100%. So what you can see here is that traditional fired clay brick has significantly lower environmental impact in all categories except for human toxicity. That's one in red. The key one, if you just want to look at one indicator, is the climate change indicator here, which is the green one. So you can see the difference. Clay bricks are almost half the impact of concrete blocks. When we look at cement versus lime mortar, we can see again lime mortar has lower environmental impact in most life cycle categories, except for higher ozone depletion and land use. Finally, and this is something we're still working on, clay roof tiles have a higher impact, environmental impact in most categories compared to concrete roofs. And this was interesting to us, and we still, the project's continuing. It's meant to extend till probably March. It's meant to finish in December, but we're going to extend it till March just to be able to wrap up a few of these things. Now, what we did after that, after sampling, testing each building material and measuring them, was that we wanted to model this and simulate it. So what we did was we used a software called IES Virtual Environment Simulation. And we created a 3D model that we could then input the various materials to try to get an indication of how this house, how this building will perform. Here's a summary of, I guess these are U values of the thermal conductivity of traditional versus modern materials. And the less conductive the material is, the better it is at regulating temperature, preventing heat coming from the outside and heat loss from the inside going out. And you can see in every instance here, from external wall to floor, ceiling, window, and roof, traditional materials have got lower thermal conductivity to modern materials. So these are a few more results from our thermal conductivity tests, and this is over a period of 1 day. So you can see the indoor air temperature in the first chart here. The red is the modern materials, and the black is the traditional materials. So traditional materials are much more stable in terms of temperature-wise, and there's only a fluctuation of about 2.4 degrees internally we can expect, compared to 6.5 degree fluctuation indoors using modern materials like concrete. Heat transfer as well, we found actually that there was, aside from a brief burst of heat lost here, there actually was a much controlled heat release with traditional material and a lower use of energy. The other two charts I wanted to share was energy consumption, which is a key issue, regardless of where we are. So we can see, again, the energy consumption is lower for the black curve, which is the traditional material, which only peaks at, which is about 1.2 kilo British thermal units per hour lower than modern materials. Carbon emissions, and this is key here, the black lines is the envelope is much smaller than modern materials. Finally, we did 1 year simulation. So those are 1 day ones. And the 1 year simulation, you don't need to look at the minimum, maximum, but just look at the mean for modern and mean for traditional across 5 categories: air temperature, external conduction gain, internal conduction gain, total energy, and total carbon emissions. And you can see in every case, traditional materials score better. And this chart here just gives you an idea of the scale of the percentage of the improvements gained by traditional materials, the highest being in terms of external conduction gain at 40%. So what are the challenges then? So obviously what we want to do is we want to empirically record these things so that we can actually take it to government to say these are the issues. We also conducted surveys as well. And so the challenges fall into 3 categories in terms of construction, in terms of governance, and finally institutional as well as local knowledge. So the big problem, and hence my question about scaling up previously for the previous presentation, really is the higher costs. And that is always the big comeback, the big pushback by contractors, by conservation architects, etc., that it costs more to use traditional materials, as well as there's a lack of skills. And because traditional materials also are more time-consuming, you cannot pour cement on the floor and let it settle, which takes no time at all in terms of pouring it. With lime, for example, you need to flatten it. So more time means higher costs, and also workers lack the sort of practical experience. In terms of governance, there's a lack of public sector capacity, a lack of policy enforcement, and lack of formal guidance by government. There's also the problem of safety regulations that prevent the use of timber, for example, because the fire department in particular would not approve houses, constructions from timber. And there's also the attitudes, general attitudes that having to comply with greener technologies, traditional materials, is just a hindrance to completing the project. Finally, there's a lack of institutional and local capacity and knowledge. There's a lack of understanding between the link, lack of understanding about the link between climate change, buildings, and urban design. Gender discrimination remains a huge issue in a male-dominated industry in particular. There's little incentives or remuneration for doing some of these things. The local communities are interested in maintaining heritage and buildings and using traditional materials, but they lack the know-how, the knowledge. And finally, decisions to use heritage materials don't occur on a individual level. It's usually at a firm or a institutional level. Finally, we come to the data on economic costs, economic viability. This is in the pricing per square meter in terms of Malaysian ringgit, MYR. So we can see we've got different, this is selected costs for building, obviously. So we've got plaster coating in terms of different layers. We've got flooring, and then we've got load-bearing walls. And you can see here that actually, although traditional materials are more expensive in some instances, in others they are very close, and in others yet they are, in terms of, say, the final layer of paint, they're actually cheaper. These premixes tend to incorporate more environmentally friendly materials, but also they include cement. So they're not necessarily greener, per se. I think when it comes to load-bearing walls, so you see clay brick is comparable to reinforced concrete, but once you compare cement bricks, then that becomes a problem. Okay, it doesn't make sense for any project to want to use clay bricks. What we're doing right now, and this is where I come in, I guess, is trying to do the full economic costing, which is covering the life cycle of materials. So we may build from cement bricks may be cheaper, but that's because the full cost of cement bricks are not included in this price that you see here. And that means at the end of the life cycle of the building, for example, it needs to include the cost of the landfill, whereas clay bricks can be broken down and reused, or it can be biodegraded. Okay, so some of the recommendations really about policy and governance around regulatory frameworks and guidance, but also incentives. And a lot of these incentives the incentives are the carrots. Okay, so there could be subsidies, but also I think there needs to be sticks. So there needs to be requirements, and perhaps to fully cost the price of cement blocks, we actually need to have a tax on that. So to bring it more in par, to reflect the true life cycle costs. Then, of course, the whole issue of capacity building and advocacy. And again, I fully agree that things need to happen from the ground. But of course, being an economist, I also think that we cannot disregard government. I don't think any of us is saying that. In fact, the listing of Georgetown as a World Heritage Site was through the work of local community and government pushing for it. So it's a way to actually rejuvenate the entire city and make it a living, breathing city. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Please, can I invite some questions from the audience? We have time for one or two. Please.
Hi, so I have a question for Jeff. That was a very interesting presentation. So on the shade aspect, there's a tremendous amount of initiative around the world, especially across the global south, Southeast Asia also, and conversations on greening cities. I'm not interested in the gentrification aspect and all those, but generally that shade practices will alleviate thermal discomfort. And that was a very interesting slide there on, and absolutely that, you know, when you have shaded environments, the temperature, it does impact the temperature. And we've done similar studies for Karachi also. But here's the rub, that we also know that in very tropical climates with rising humidity levels, shade doesn't make a difference. Trees don't make a difference. The biosphere is such where I've lived in Singapore for several years, you know, and so standing under a tree in Singapore actually can be pretty lethal. And you're still sweating, and your body is not thermoregulating. How would it work? So that's, again, the local climate aspect, aside from the global warming aspect. So how would it work in this context? Because it really kind of, again, it complicates how we think about shade, which is not a straightforward thing. Because with lethal humidity, it really complicates how the biosphere begins to change. And maybe then we need to think, well, are there certain kinds of trees that we need to plant, and what are their relationships with the local ecosystem? So I was just wondering, in the context of your research, if that is a thought that comes up, and you know, so.
Thank you. You're right. I mean, I come from Malaysia, and my hometown is Penang, although I grew up in Kuala Lumpur. And you spend your life basically trying not to sweat. Yeah, and the moment you go outside, you start sweating because of humidity. The shade from trees, thank you so much for the question, because actually it allows me to share this little, what I learned from Think City when they tried to plant trees along the beach front in Penang, in Georgetown. And what that did actually was it created shade, but it blocked the sea breeze. So you need, air circulation becomes key as well. So that's why a breeze is so key in these places. And if you've got seafront, you want to plant the trees perpendicular to the bridge to channel that sea breeze in and not to cut it off. So, yeah, so if it's a still day, then it's challenging.
Thank you so much. My question actually follows very much related to the question about humidity, and maybe slightly repeating what's being said there, but humidity levels in internal environments, obviously, and using traditional materials and their ability to kind of absorb moisture in the air and release it at different rates to kind of modern materials. Question I had is that, was there any uptake in kind of low-cost desiccant dehumidification devices, dehumidifying internal environments rather than using air conditioning, which lowers the internal temperature and leads to kind of issues of moisture risk, condensation, damp, mold in such like humid contexts? Is there much thought about that?
Not that I'm aware of, although, you know, the first thing you notice in an air-conditioned room is that actually you could have the temperature at 26 degrees, which is what I sleep in here. But it's just, because it's dry, suddenly it feels much more comfortable. So, but there's no dehumidification discussion right now that I'm aware of. But some slides that I didn't include were, I showed you the front of the fort, the cement, legacy cement and limestone. What Think City also did was they measured the temperature inside. And what we found was, obviously with the cement plastered interior, it was drier because the lime plaster interior in storeroom 8 it's breathable, so allows moisture out. So humidity was much higher, but with ventilation, natural ventilation, it was actually cooler because of the humidity inside. So I think the thing again is ventilation probably, that if you have a natural airflow, it does keep it cooler. I hope that answers, but we can have a further discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please join me in saying thank you to Professor Tan.
Thank you. So we're going to continue. And I think for the next presenter, it's not a trope, but actually a reality to say that this person really needs no introduction in the current context, because our next presenter is Dr. Jay Das, who is the Associate Director of the Institute for Global Health and Development, the sponsor of this event. So I'm sure he's been involved in all the different aspects of it. So Dr. J.K. Das is an Associate Professor and Associate Director of the Institute for Global Health and Development. A leading public health researcher, he has authored more than 250 peer-reviewed international papers, including 30 publications in Lancet, and contributed to over 20 book chapters. His work spans community and clinical trials, population-based surveys, and evidence-based systematic reviews with a focus on maternal, newborn, and child health. Dr. Das has received multiple international recognitions, including the Falcon Award for Disease Elimination, and has been ranked among the top 0.1% of highly cited researchers globally by Clarivate. His research has informed national and global policy through collaborations with WHO and other international partners, and he continues to contribute to academic training and public health capacity building across low and middle income countries. So please welcome Dr. Das.
Thank you. Thank you for such a nice and kind introduction. So I must admit one thing before I start. So I've been thinking since yesterday, after hearing so many architects and experts in this area, it was so naive of me to accept and present this work in front of the experts, because I'm in no way an expert in area of architect, urban planning, or material or science engineer. So I'll try to do the best, and I hope I'm not butchered by these experts by the end of my presentation. So the topic of my presentation is structural heat adaptation and education. This is a randomized controlled trial which is funded by the Wellcome Trust. We have just currently concluded the pilot phase of this, and I'm going to share those results, and starting on the trial starting next year. So we have collaborators with us. Fortunately, they are in the audience right now. We have collaborators from UCL and London School of Hygiene who have helped and guided us in shaping this strategy. So I'll start. I wouldn't spend much time here. We have been discussing this morning since yesterday that how heat waves are increasing in severity, intensity, and how Pakistan is one of the most affected countries or geographies in the world. And on top of these increasing heat and climate hazards, the existing inequities that Pakistan has in terms of socio-demographic, poverty, food insecurity, these all leads to compounded vulnerability, especially to the most vulnerable populations, which includes women, children, elderly, and outdoor workers. When it comes to the context of Pakistan, the vulnerabilities vary, both in terms of the context when it comes to urban areas and rural areas. We see usually in rural areas people, the kind of work that they do in agriculture fields, at outdoor laborers, they don't have much shade. They work in peak summer times, especially when they come from Sindh or Punjab. The temperature goes as high as 45 degrees for quite a few days, and even in some regions touches beyond 50 degrees Celsius. But the story is no different when it comes to urban areas, but it has its own challenges, because the way these cities have grown, or I would say mushroomed over the years, especially when we talk about Karachi, but all the single stories buildings have now become 3, 4, 5-story buildings without proper planning. The streets have narrowed, and there is absolutely no ventilation. And on top of that, there is no electricity. Professor Nausheen presented to us in the morning the picture of Karachi, and it shows that how these dwellings are currently, people are living in these 4 to 500 square feet apartments with no electricity, no ventilation, and especially women who are trapped into these apartments, and on top of that, they are also cooking in peak summer times. As I mentioned, so this is a SHAPES trial, and because we started our work in climate not very far ago, it was just 3-4 years. We are still learning throughout the process, and what we did was that part of this trial, we had an exhaustive formative phase, which had various components, which helped us understand on what could be done, or at least tried and tested in both the urban and the rural context of Pakistan. Before this, we did a mapping exercise. We looked at the existing literature. And of course, there is ample literature which suggests that all of these climate change hazards, whether they're extreme cold, heat, wildfires, storms, floods, hurricanes, all of them have an impact on a range of health outcomes, whether they're infectious, nutrition, non-communicable diseases, direct impact of these hazards, mental health. So there is ample literature which shows that there is associations with these, and so we don't need to do any further studies looking at these associations. But when we come to look at, we started to look for what are the possible strategies which could be adapted in our communities, which can make our communities more resilient or adaptive to these climate health changes. And what we found was the interventions that have been tested in this space are very far and few. And also, most of these interventions have been tested in the higher income countries or the global north of the world. And the next slide that I will show will clearly show you that why that's the case, because when it comes to extreme heat, most of the interventions that have been tested revolve around air conditioning, whether they are air conditioning spaces, community spaces, air conditioning costumes for workers, collars. So, of course, these are effective, these improve health, these improve work productivity, but of course, these are not feasible, especially for the context that we all work in, because electricity, which is not required, which we don't have sufficient, then the cost of this, and of course, the most important thing that most of the electricity still comes from the burning of the fossil fuels it adds, and these air conditioners also add to the urban heat island impact. Snapshot of Karachi or any urban city, especially in Pakistan, you'll see all the green spaces that previously did exist have vanished. And of course, for the vested interest, for a few, we have lost those spaces. And this is just one of the slides that we saw, as I mentioned previously, the pregnant women or the women are the ones who are the most vulnerable because they are not free to go out. Men usually, when there's no electricity in the evening, they sit outside on the streets. They can wear less clothes. But women are trapped. They cannot go out. They have extra layers of clothes. And also on top of that, they are cooking. So a figure, we did this analysis over a few days and showed that most of the women are exposed 24/7. You see, most of the time is exposed to extreme heat time in the summers. So there are very few hours, even at night, when the temperature is below the required levels. As I mentioned, we did an exhaustive formative phase, which started by systematic review. I showed you a gap map approach, but we also looked at literature, what could be done, because we mentioned that air conditioning is not a plausible strategy. What we found was there were things like reflective paints, shadings, alternate pavement materials. So there was some literature which was tested, of course, in pilot settings, small studies, which show that these do lead to reduction in the surface temperatures and also in the ambient temperatures to a variable degree. Then we had an in-depth qualitative study in which we had discussions with all the important stakeholders, more importantly, the community themselves, and try to understand what could be done. We talked to various experts in this area, various committee members, and what is feasible, what is something that the committee would accept and buy in. So that exhaustive exercise was done. We did a thermal drone scanning of both Karachi and a rural setting of Sindh. And as Jeff also showed in his slide, what we see is there is variability, and the roofs are the structures which heat the most. But you would also see that there is so much variability, even within a couple of streets of Karachi. Some roofs are warmer than others. So we try to understand, with the help of our partners, collaborators, technical experts, to understand what are the reasons. And as we've been discussing, local materials like mud, if that is used, that has a lower temperatures. And this is also a slide showing the thermal imaging of a rural village of Sindh. Again, you see the variability of the surface temperatures or the roof temperatures within a small village. Then based on, we triangulated all our findings and had a technical consultations with various experts and stakeholders. And based on this, we formed and finalized a few interventions. We selected the study sites, and which is in Karachi, we chose Bilal Colony and Mehran Town for our intervention. And in Sindh, we chose Matiari as a district where we would test these pilot interventions. So as I mentioned, it's a randomized controlled trial. So we have clusters in the intervention group, then also clusters which are in the control group. A cluster was defined any structure having 50 to 70 households. And because we were not looking at the impact of these interventions only on the ambient temperatures or the environment, but we also wanted to look at how these interventions can make an impact on actual health outcomes and physiological parameters of a subset of those population. So in pilot phase, we tested a range of structural interventions. And we've been discussing, there's a lot of people who have worked, experts in this work area, who show that how new dwellings could be built, which could be more climate resilient and which could be more temperature friendly, or the dwellings could be more temperature friendly for the population to live in. But we wanted to see what could be done for the existing thousands, hundreds of thousands or millions of structures which are already there. Ideally, you would bulldoze the whole city of Karachi and build it again, but absolutely that's not possible. So we thought, why not do something within those existing structures, or at least try what could be done, and if they can prove to be effective or not. So we tested based on our literature, based on our qualitative, based on consultations with our collaborators, technical experts. We came up with a range of interventions that we pilot tested in both urban and rural contexts of Pakistan. So in the urban areas, we tested roof shading, providing some shade to the roofs, facade or wall shadings, solar panels, because one of the main findings that we found from qualitative studies was that irrespective of what we do, unless we don't have electricity or fans running 24/7, we would not have that thermal comfort in the households that we live in, although that might not lead to a reduction in temperature, but at least it can provide us some comfort. Then, of course, solar reflective paints and our local variant of lime paints for that. And of course, we have been discussing this also, that how improving the ventilation can have an impact on the indoor environment temperatures. And similarly, we tested some interventions for the rural interventions. I'll take you through some of this in my following slides. Apart from this urban and rural, we also had some street shading, and that was through greening and through other interventions also. So what we tested in the rural areas? First thing was rendering. What we found was that, as we've been discussing, that people have now moved from mud to brick houses. And for a variety of reasons, one of the reasons is flood. These are more resilient to floods. And of course, it gives you a higher socioeconomic status or standing in the community that live in. So people have moved to those brick houses. But usually, when you go to the rural areas, there is no plaster or rendering to those bricks, and there are spaces in between. We did some thermal imaging, and we saw that all the warm air from the outside was sneaking in into the households, especially in the peak summer time. So we thought, why not if we just cover those bricks, at least prevent the warm air from getting in the households. And the material that we chose, it was after a lot of back and forth, we came up with a balance, which is a combination of mud, lime, bow, and jute, and which has been fairly, we have been testing for the last 6 months. It has withstood temperatures, rainfalls, winds, and also provides respite in terms of the temperatures. So we had serial measurements of temperatures before and after. There was some intervention and control. And what we saw was that, what we saw was that in the peak summertime, there was a 3 to 4 degrees difference in the indoor or the ambient temperatures of those dwellings, and 8 to 10 degrees difference in the surface temperatures of these walls. And over the 24-hour period, we did this for, I think, a couple of weeks. We regularly monitored those temperatures, and we saw that the temperature decline was highest in the daytime, and at the night time, it was usually comparable. There was not much difference in the intervention and the control group, but there was significant decline in temperatures during the daytime. One of the other things that we provided was this facade, veranda. We have been talking this is something which has been inherent to our architecture or living structures, but somehow vanished. People now just build one house with 4 walls which are exposed to sun from all sides. So we created this to at least have the more exposed wall shaded so that there's no direct sunlight, and look at what impact could it create. And again, we saw there was a difference in temperature, especially during the peak summer hours or the peak daytime. One of the things that we also tested was solar panels. We provided a solar-powered battery with fan and light to each dwellings. And of course, there was not much difference in terms of the reductions in temperatures of those dwellings compared to the control. But I mentioned this was usually done for the thermal comfort and feel or perceptions of the populations. One of the other things that we tried was this double roof, because most of these structures, although the walls are of brick, the roofs are usually made of mud or clay. So we tried to cover this by a local material. We created a double roof, which was extended so that it provided shade both to the roof and the 4 walls. And at the same time, what it did was it reduced the temperatures, it reduced the direct exposure of rains and sun to these mud walls and roofs also. So we thought it could also add to the longevity of these structures. So these double roof was created, and what we found was that there was significant declines in temperatures compared to the controlled structures. And again, what we found was maximum declines were of the range of 6 degrees during the peak summer time. And of course, the night temperatures were relatively comparable, although low in some instances, in some structures also. We're also planning on doing some community shades, because people who usually go to these fields or children walking from schools to these villages, so at least have these shaded areas where people can sit, have some respite. There's availability of water, which could have an impact on those health outcomes also. So these are some proposed, which we still have to some pilot test. We also tested some interventions in the urban areas, and one was, again, the concept was same, but you will see different material being used in terms of the context and acceptability to the populations. We created these wall mount shades to prevent direct sun exposure, especially to the dwellings which are on the 1st or 2nd floor and directly exposed to the sun. Again, a significant decline. You can see the nighttime temperatures are usually comparable, but the daytime temperatures, the indoor temperatures are 3 to 4 degrees lower. This is showing the difference across 15 days. Again, significant decline, varying from 2 to 4 degrees in different settings. One thing that we've been discussing is improving the ventilation and the wind catchers, which was an inherent, you would see it. So many structures used to have, especially when you traveled to Sindh, but now they have unfortunately disappeared. So we found some dwellings, because most of these structures, as I mentioned, were single story. They have been informally, without proper planning and designing, have been made multi-storied. So most of the structures don't allow us to do any modifications to those structures, because those are weak structures. But where we found structures which are strong enough, we tried and installed these wind catchers also, and also created windows for cross ventilations where there was a possibility. So just adding a window where there are walls on the 4 sides and there's place, we added those windows also. And we saw that this had an impact, not in the daytime, but also the night temperatures were relatively lower to the control areas. So especially in the Karachi, we know the sea breeze, the evening breeze, I think those are having an impact here. This is a temperatures over a 2 weeks period, we saw significant declines in the overall day and nighttime temperatures compared to the control structures. We also tried this solar reflective paint and also the local variant or the traditional variant tuna. There was not much difference between these two, and we saw a temperature difference of 2 to 3 degrees by applying these solar reflective paints on the roofs of those structures. Again, solar panel was provided, not much difference in terms of temperatures, but again, thermal comfort and thermal feel were something that we highlighted. We also created roof shades on the top floor of these urban structures, and this also provided shaded to the roofs and had a greater impact also during the peak summer time. So these are the 4 or 5 interventions that we have tested in both rural and urban settings. And as mentioned, that we also wanted to do something on the streets. So we tried greening also, and as was discussed in our previous presentation, we also tried to cover these streets. So initially we did some designs, we covered the street fully, but again that trapped the heat. It was really humid, hot, and when the street used to be cleaned, the dust used to be trapped. So we came up with a design with this intermittent coverage of street with this material, and which provided shaded to the streets. What we found, we were only interested initially in looking at the impact of temperatures, health outcomes, physiological markers, but something that came to our surprise, which we hadn't thought initially, but even in a few pilot interventions, few structures that we have pilot tested this in, this had a greater impact on the quality of life also. And how? Because these verandas that were created, which were not there, provided space, additional space to the community. They moved their kitchen, which are usually sometimes inside the households. They used to burn those biomass within the households, so the household air pollution was being added. So they moved the kitchens outside. They started doing their embroidery or other works there. They had the charpai or a traditional bed set up, sitting there during, provided them respite from the direct sunlight, and children playing there. Someone also tied their animals, goats, to those shaded areas. And similarly, we saw this in the urban areas also. And sometimes even in the top picture you see here, a whole household moved to the top floor. So this was something we didn't expect, and what we saw was that in some populations this provided, of course there was one additional floor that was added. People were having even family gatherings, barbecues, and other things there. And women who cannot go outside on the streets, at least they can go to the top of those floors when there's no electricity and gather there and have some quality time there. So these are the things that we are experiencing right now, and maybe this could have a greater impact than we initially thought. Some of the outcomes that we are measuring, as I mentioned, we are looking at the environmental measurements, looking at the impact on temperatures, humidities. We are looking at some sleep quality, as also highlighted in our initial discussions, because the temperatures are improved at night time. One of the key indicator, I think, which is also linked to these poor health outcomes, mental health outcomes, work productivity, I think is sleep. So if you improve the sleep at night, I think it can have a greater impact, and that's what we are trying to assess in this study. And we're also given some gadgets to a subpopulation looking at the impact on heart rates and other physiological markers also. And these are some of the direct heat-related illnesses, hospitalizations, visits, mortality that we are trying to capture. And one of the outcomes that we have now added based on our pilot study is looking at the quality of life to see whether does this improve the quality of life of the population or not. Various gadgets are being used. They're all very validated devices, including iButton, Castrol. These thermal drone cameras were used. Then in a subset, we are giving these trackers, these wearable devices to capture their sleep, physical activity, and physiological markers. We have various timelines of capturing the data, so that we have 24/7 data for these populations, both during the summer and winter times. And the idea is that maybe by the next year, we would have some results, because now we are starting from January onwards, a full-fledged trial, which would have 10 clusters in the interventions, 10 clusters in the control group, both in the urban and the rural setting of Pakistan. And then we are going to see actually what we are seeing in the pilot phase, because this trial is statistically powered. So this would give us some answers whether this could have an impact. One thing more that I like to add is that we are also, for the sustainability, we have also added a component that community themselves are contributing this also. We have set up a target of 20 to 25%, which could be in terms of financial, in terms of labor, in terms of supplies of materials. So they are also contributing, so it can add to the sustainability of those. So in summary, I think this Shapes provides an opportunity, this Shapes project provides an opportunity to empower the communities to, of course, stay cool, safe, improve their work productivity, and enhance their quality of life. So with this, I'd like to close my presentation, and thank you all for listening. And before I end this, I have, I think, a few of the team members of Shapes Trial are there. I would like them to please stand up, and I think those are the people who really deserve this applause. So applause to the whole Shapes team who's here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jay. So I have the unenviable task of enforcing time, so maybe one question. Okay, over here.
Thank you, Mr. Das. It was indeed an insightful session. Shayan Sami from 53rd Common from Civil Services Academy. Sir, you mentioned that you intervened in rural areas, urban areas as well. So, sir, I want to ask, in rural areas, did you consider the architecture plan of that area? Because in rural areas, we do have room. Means we can change the size, or we can change the placement of the veranda or rooms, etc. For urban areas, did you apply this model in tall or vertical structures? Like in the city of Karachi, we have many flats as well. And there is a issue of thermal or heat adaptation. And sir, last question is this: in Pakistan, we do have cold areas as well, like Quetta or Ziyarat. So is there any plan for implementing any such thing for insulation there as well? Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. I think I'll start by your first question. And you mentioned Quetta. Quetta is my hometown where I come from. So absolutely, not as part of this project, but as part of another project that we have just won from Wellcome Trust, we are trying to do this, what could be done in the colder regions of Pakistan, and maybe sometime in the next year or after that, I'll be in a better shape to answer that question. Now, coming to your first two questions, first context, coming about rural context, I was also under the same impression that people would have space. But unfortunately, the things now, how they have moved over the years, now even when we talked about having a bamboo outside, like say 5 or 10 feet away from the walls, people said that this land does not belong to us. So over time, things have changed. Now people, even those villages, they have defined spaces. And one of the major reasons is because previously one family used to have household and a land, but as those families grow by generations, every son has a separate room, and then the next generations again. So I think this was the major reason that now we don't have ample space outside their household that's currently not available. Where there was space, we came up with some more ideas which we can discuss separately. Your question regarding the urban areas, of course, we are doing it in multi-storied structures, all of the interventions that you saw, but not in the formal build-up structures, but the informal areas of Karachi, where those buildings have just, as I mentioned, were single-story apartments, but again, because of the family enhanced, all the sons started building a story one after the other. So all of those informal settings are the areas that we are working in. Thank you so much for these questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
It's my great pleasure to introduce the final speaker in this session. This is Dr. Asad Ali, who is the chair of the Department of Community Health Sciences, and the Nur Mohammed Sharif Endowed Chair, Professor of Pediatrics and Community Health Sciences. He is an alumnus at AKU Medical College and obtained his advanced clinical training in pediatrics at Duke University and fellowship in pediatric infectious diseases and masters in public health at Vanderbilt University, USA. His research interests pertain broadly to pediatric public health in developing countries, especially infectious diseases, vaccines, and childhood malnutrition in Pakistan and the region. His group is particularly interested in finding sustainable solutions to these problems grounded in our societies. He has led many clinical studies with funding from institutions like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, NIH USA, Wellcome Leap, and CDC USA to address these problems using cutting-edge scientific approaches.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Thank you to all the audience who are here. I especially want to thank the organizers, Dr. Bhutta, Dr. Das, for inviting me here and letting me share some of this work. So folks, as mentioned, I am Asad Ali. I'm a pediatrician, pediatric infectious diseases. I work at the intersection of pediatrics, infectious diseases, malnutrition, and a little bit of poverty. And one of the places that I have been working in is Matiari. So Matiari is a rural district about 300 kilometers away from Karachi. We have a setup there, and we have been working there for a long time. It has, so a lot of our work in malnutrition, the whole of our group has been working there, over there. What happened was that in 2022, these horrible floods came. So the floods really, so one of the districts that were most affected was Matiari. Okay, so we are, health people. We were doing our work on malnutrition. We were based there. This was an inconvenience for us that that there was flood over there. But it kind of turns out that we kind of thought that we need to do more. Yes, we are not engineers, we are not architects, we are health scientists, but we have been there for a very long time. So what should we do? What can we do to help the community, which is really devastated with these floods? So as it mentions over here, Sindh was disproportionately affected, and one of the top districts that were identified as worse affected was Matiari. So we said, yeah, what can we do? Knowing our limitations in terms of, knowing our strengths, we had very deep roots in the community. The community knew us very well. We had been there. Dr. Bhutta started that site, and it was kind of for a very long time. So we have a very deep connections, but we were not, we were not into buildings. We were not into constructions and this. So this challenge that hit was not an exclusively, yes, there was a health implication of it, but it wasn't a direct health. It was more of an environment and a kind of a climate challenge that happened. What happened there was that this was the thing that was very tough, and we all knew this, that the reason that there was so much devastation was that at baseline, the situation was pretty bad. They were literally, the population there was living in jhompdis. These are the kind of houses that you can see in there. There is structural vulnerability, very poor construction quality, open defecation, very high rates, inadequate sanitation, many other issues in there. So this whole thing that we talk about of our indigenous kind of knowledge in terms of what used to be there, that was kind of abandoned. And these are, right now if you go there, these are all just jhompdis in which they are living. And you can imagine when calamity hits, what will happen to those, right? Those just got wiped off. And it was just horrible. That's why, yes, the devastation was bad, but the baseline infrastructure was so bad that, everybody just kind of went up to the streets, along the roadsides and all. We did health clinics and all to the places where we could reach. We reached quite a few places, but it was kind of like, just putting off fire at the end. So the feeling was, we ought to do better. What can we do better? Knowing yes, we are limited in our knowledge and skills, but there are people who are very experts in this. And, we are wise people, otherwise well-resourced, well-connected. What can we do? So Yasmin Lari, somebody heard of her on CNN actually. This kind of was there that, these could be local solutions, zero carbon, very low cost. And, she was featured on CNN, and we kind of, saw that. We reached out to her, okay, what can we do in here, okay? And turns out that this animation was on CNN, and it was kind of pretty amazing that CNN is telling us what is happening right in our kind of neighborhood in terms of we looked her up that these bamboo-based houses, these are very close to what our traditional setups have been. They are very strong, earth reinforced, zero carbon, low cost. So we were, as part of our kind of citizenship over there, yes, we were doing research, but we were also doing some social work. We formed a social enterprise, a not-for-profit social enterprise, which was trying to work on kind of malnutrition and other things in Matiari. So we had been doing this work. So we thought that we could really leverage this. So leveraging this kind of what we called Sadka Pakistan, this not-for-profit that we had, we got a team of about 10 people who were good in construction, that there was a local talent. We got them and we took them to Yasmin Lari's kind of workshop. This was in Thatta. We put them over there for about good 5-7 days so that they could learn how to make these houses and all. So this was, so not just the houses, but there were toilets also. We were, she was able to advise how to do those toilets, stoves also. And we brought them back in here. We got some, kind of philanthropic funding. And we said, let's do this and let's see what impact, what can we do? Because, in this. So turns out that this was remarkably cheap and remarkably high throughput. So in a month, those 10 people, so what you do is actually you don't do all the work, you do much of the technical work, but a lot of the work is done by the people who you are making the houses for. So they don't pay you, but what they do is they put in the effort, the man hours or woman hours in this case. So they create all those gara and everything. And you wouldn't believe that so I'll tell you this. So this is how it eventually kind of comes out as, okay? So there are these octagonal bamboo structures that are all kind of tied together. Earthen, mud is kind of just reinforces the walls, and then there are these organic, the rooftops that are in there. And you wouldn't believe how much one costs, okay? So one of these costs about $180. And in a month's time, we were able to make about 60 to 80 houses, okay? So this was a pipeline, 60 to 80 houses. A toilet was for about, what's about 25,000 rupees is about $100 or so, okay? So that was a toilet. The stove was 500 rupees. 500 rupees is like $2, right? So this, and so the cost was that low, and the throughput was so high. So we were, we said this is great, and it was, so we didn't, the people didn't have the paying power, but they had the muscle power, and also, and they had a lot of those skills. So for example, that lime making and those, so they were able to do it. So we kind of like got all of them together. We were able to do. So you'll see some. Oh, sorry. So you'll see some of these photos. So we built them so this was right after floods, 2022, 23. And, so the inside area is about 12 feet diameter kind of in there. And very, and these were essentially, as, you all you probably have heard. So this is all indigenous kind of and the temperature difference, the cooling things is fantastic. So we were able to, so these are some snapshots. So people took really pride in this. So all these beautifications and all, this is not part of the 50,000 rupees or $186. They did it themselves and all, just because of the pride that they have. So the other things that we did, this is a solar dehydrator. That's also an initiative that I'll tell some other time about this. But toilets were made, stoves were made. So toilet was, as somebody said, weren't connected to the houses, they were separate, but for every 3 houses, we were able to make 1 toilet. So it's a shared toilet in there. Stoves we were able to do, which was remarkably cheap. 500 rupees is less than $2. So we were able to make, in total we made about 750 of these houses and all, okay? The key thing was throughput. You really had to do, you can't make 1 house at a time. You have to make them in bulk, because there was a whole kind of a workshop that we created in which those bamboo structures were made and all. So if you have enough throughput to make 60 to 80 houses a month, then you can really do this in that rate, and it's pretty amazing. So what we did was, this was more, I mean, we actually, this was done, so this was our social, but then we said, let us see what the impact of this is, okay? So after this was done, after about, a lot of time, we said, so they survived these very high rainfalls and storms that happened afterwards. We knew they would survive. These were, advised, Yasmin Lari kind of had the backing of this, don't worry, this will survive, and they have survived. But we said, let's do an impact assessment, formal impact assessment. So what we did was a cross-sectional observational study utilizing mixed methods between October 23 to January 2024. So this was about a year or so after we built our houses. So the criteria was that in 12 villages across 2 union councils after due ERC approvals, so 104 women of reproductive age, 52 residing in eco-friendly housing that we jointly built with the people, and where they had to live for at least 6 months, and 52 residing in traditional houses. The traditional houses were, in the same kind of a neighborhood, but these were the jhompadis and all that they were living kind of before. So we measured multiple things. What I'm going to be talking about is the quality of life indicators and the mental health effects of this. As you can imagine, in 6, so we looked at it from very, so here we put in our academic hat to really measure it in the in a robust manner. So these were the houses. So as you can see, not much difference between the 2 groups. If anything, the no formal education was a little higher in the eco-friendly houses than the traditional houses. But overall, as you can see, the portfolio in terms of other things were kind of similar. You wouldn't expect 6 months living in here, these would be very different. But these were, at kind of like baseline, they were all kind of pretty similar. In children also, these were the children that were living in there, so this kind of tells you that they were pretty similar at baseline. This is what we were really happy about, okay? So these are the surveys. So these are some very standard surveys that have been done. What we did was, So for quality of life, we use the WHOQL brief survey. This has 26 items for psychological, physical, social, and other overall quality of life. For mental health, we had the PHQ-9 and GAT-7 surveys that were done in these populations. So these are pretty robust tests that are available to see what are the differences. And what we were very happy to find was that living in these houses really had a profound kind of effect on the mental health in terms of the overall quality of life. As you can see, in terms of the statistically significant difference overall in the 4 domains, there was a difference. In terms of the PHQ-9 and GAT-7 surveys, the depression and anxiety, the people living in these houses really had a very, there were clear mental health benefits for those who were living in these eco-friendly houses. The people who were living in these eco-friendly houses, these 52, we were able to do more qualitative kind of analysis and really did some interviews. And these interviews were along these three themes of their thoughts on the physical and structural aspects of it, the benefit of this in terms of the weather and climate durability, and the psychosocial experiences. What did they think of it? And so the stove is good because the pipe takes all the smoke away, so there is no smoke around me while cooking. I'll remind you, the cost of this was rupees 500, okay, less than $2. I have not used my old stove since I got this new one. I have no problems cooking now. There's no smoke and my cooking pots are not burnt. We really needed a bathroom. This is much easier. Before it was very difficult for girls and women. There is enough room for 3 beds easily. There is spacious enough for us in good weather. Very good house, spacious, bright and airy, strong. It stays cool in the summer and warm in the winter. The quality of materials were used is good because we were there every step of the way. This was co-built with people and these. Now when it rains, we do not worry about what will happen because this house is sturdy. So these are some of the things that we take kind of for granted. So you know, the sense of ownership of those juggies and those jhonpris aren't the sense of a home. This gives a sense of a home, which is a very big thing. So overall, I mean, absolutely not surprised what will happen with 6 months of living in there in terms of your BMI, hemoglobin levels, and this. But otherwise, you know, in terms of the baseline, otherwise characteristics, there are, you know, these things were not different in the 2 groups. However, they had significantly lower depression and anxiety scores, significantly higher psychological and other quality of life scores. So the floods worsened pre-existing poor housing conditions, and these houses offer a feasible alternative to traditional structures. And these are traditional as well, but those jhonpris can be a viable solution for disaster relief initiatives in high poverty settings. As you know, the Sindh government kind of came up. There was a trying to lobby that, you know, use this design, but they, you know, there is, as many people have said in here, there is a love for brick with the government and all. So they kind of went with their own design, which is about 3-4 times more expensive than this. And so they are there, but you know, so I would say that yes, people love this. When you ask people on the ground, they would rather have these pakka houses than the ones that they have. But the point is that the scale of the problem is so high that there is room for all of these solutions in there. So I think that, you know, there are many lessons if you want to take in here. You know, the scale at which you can produce them is fantastic. Okay, 60 to 80 houses a month is you know, you'll find it hard to make it with any other design. The co-creation thing is very useful. The cost is very, very low. Okay, less than $200 is what people would spend for a dinner. And you know, you give somebody a house for 30-35 years, there is this huge kind of investment in here. So those are all kind of advantages in here. We want to, I mean, yes, I know those pakka houses are very attractive to people. The government is committed, 2.1 million houses will be built and all. Nothing against them, but I think that somebody very nicely showed the numbers yesterday as well. I think the scope of the problem is very large, and there is definitely room for models such as these and all, and they can be kind of, they should be used. There is nothing inferior in this. I think for the right setting, these have advantages over the pakka houses as well. So we are looking for ways to expand this. This is, as we said, this is not our core kind of field, but this has been a very good experience, and I'm grateful to Dr. Bhutta. I asked him for this opportunity. Let me present this in here, because of the title of this conference as well, and I'm grateful for your time and attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please, can I invite some questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Thank you. I have two questions. Did you do any analysis of these houses after the recent floods? Because your figures are of 22, 24. And the other question is, what is the anticipated life of each one of these houses?
So the floods, this time round, the floods, the conventional floods didn't reach Matiari this time. But what we have had, all of these have been built, I should tell you, they have all been built a little higher from the ground. So whatever the water level was in the last flood, these have been built a little higher. So this time round, we didn't have those kind of floods in Matiari, but we have had torrential rains and all, and those have been, they have been kind of, they have held all of them. What is expected is that these should have a life of 30, 35 years. What is needed is that after every monsoon season and all, they need a little bit of repair. Okay, that is needed, but otherwise the torrential rains haven't damaged them. People love it because, they don't get wet in this. And we think that, at least these have been built keeping in mind the water levels that came last time round in Matiari, and they are all a little bit on the higher side. So yeah, we think that this will have a lot. The other thing is that all of them, when we gave it to people, we had a written thing in which these are given to the woman of the house. Okay, so the woman is the on paper kind of owner of these, but they are built keeping the flood levels in mind.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question regarding sanitization. So you build, or not you, whoever build one washroom for 3 household, and is it possible going further to make one washroom for each household? The other thing is related to it as well, like it says that 3 bed can fit in one room or one house. So it means depending on the size of the bed, either 2 can sleep on one bed or 1 can sleep on one bed. So between 3 to 4 people can sleep, I'm assuming, in that household. But what about the family of 5, 6, 7, 8? Are they given like more than one house or whatever?
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
asking.
you. Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the toilets, so there is communal living, right? People live in villages. The villages have a boundary. So we haven't gotten this feedback to build more toilets. Okay, so 1 per 3. Because there was a lot of open defecation kind of previously in here. So this actually we haven't gotten the feedback that every house should have their own toilet. Okay, so these toilets are kind of built a little bit on the periphery of the village, within the boundary, but a little bit in the kind of on the side of it. One thing that we ought to do better that we have not done is septic tanks. Okay, that we, our model doesn't have it, and that we haven't been able to crack the code how to do that. Okay, in terms of this, what I'm talking about are the charpais that fit in there. Okay, when people, not everybody sleeps on the charpai. Okay, so some people would sleep on the charpai, some people would sleep kind of on the floor and all, and typically speaking. So with that, 4 or 5 people can sleep in there. So this, during the day, it provides a refuge from the heat when people are out in the field and they are coming back in. it works. So I think, yes, the size could be increased, but I wouldn't say that this has come as a significant concern based on the surveys that we have done, that the size is too small. I personally don't think that it makes a big difference. I mean, I think what you need to do is keep it clean and all. And I think it's a matter of how many people use it. So, you know, if you could have one per family, but if you don't keep it clean versus one that is shared by 3 families, but keeping it clean is a responsibility in there. I mean, yes, more the better, I guess. But I think what is more important than increasing the numbers is to sort out that septic tank thing. That is more important that we have to figure out.
So, Dr. Asad, what a pleasure, first of all. I think one of the things that he emphasized in the beginning, it was a response to a situation. And the outcome tells us that the response has served most of its purposes. My question to you is, you referred to when you pitched it to the government already embarked upon some Pakka house loans and others. We know what Pakistan is, we know what Sindh is, we know the kind of inequities and the kind of poverty, the poorest of the poor. Didn't we make an effort to still pitch it to them that for a certain subset of population, these are still the solutions? We'll not be building Pakka homes for all those jhopri walas and for all those who are on the streets or on the roads. So wouldn't that make sense? Because scaling it up is the need of the hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Suhail Sahab. I would absolutely, I personally, I agree with that. I think when you say these things, you know, you need to have credibility and all. So the point is that, you know, forums like these, one show this, I would encourage, we did this whole thing about, getting some people to visit it, a media thing, and also with all of these things, you show credibility that this is a good thing, and this, because otherwise, everybody comes up with, this will fall apart when this happens and that happens. So you have to build credibility. I do think this has room in the future, but it needs advocacy. It needs so it needs work. We are working on that, and this presentation and these kind of things are part of that effort.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Dr. Ali.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bashir and Dr. Bunel, for chairing this insightful session. On behalf of the Institute for Global Health and Development, I would also like to extend our gratitude to all our speakers for their valuable presentations and to our audience for an engaging discussion. Can I please request our chairs to present tokens of appreciation to our presenters, starting with architect Shahid Saeed Khan. Dr. Jeff Tan. Dr. Jay Das. And lastly, Dr. Asad Ali. Now, I would like to request Dr. Louis Tessir, Research Director at the IRD University of Health Sciences in Cambodia, to help present tokens of appreciation to our chairs, Dr. Bashir and Dr. Bunel. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now break for lunch and prayer. Lunch will be served in the designated dining area, and we kindly request all guests to reconvene in the auditorium by 2 p.m. sharp, as we will begin Session C promptly at that time. Thank you.